Hello, hello, hello. I'm Simona Costantini, and I'm obsessed with helping you connect to your purpose and teaching you about all things mindset, business, podcasting, and everything in between. I realized I deserved and wanted more from this thing called life, so I changed my beliefs, healed my hurt, and made it my mission to help you do the same. I'm a recovering people pleaser turned life coach and podcast producer. I teach busy business owners how to confidently fall in love with their life and business and live it on their terms. On this show, you get everything raw and real, from inspirational guest interviews to deep dives into topics like life, relationships, business, purpose, growth, and mindset. I lay it all on the line every single time. Think of this as your one-stop shop to help you live a more purposeful and inspired life. This is the Happiness Happens podcast. Are you ready to hear this inspiring conversation? Let's dive on in. Hello, everyone. Welcome to this week's episode on the Happiness Happens podcast. Super excited to have you back here today for this week's episode. I hope you're having an amazing week. I'm super excited to dive into this week's topic. But before we dive in, let's just read a listener review. So this one is from Nicole D. And she says, love listening to this podcast. I'm so grateful to have found this podcast. Simona is an amazing host that makes her guests and listeners feel welcomed. I listen to it whenever I want to pick me up. Thanks, Simona. Thank you so much, Nicole, for this amazing review. And if you want to leave a review as well and have it read on the podcast, just head over to the Apple Podcast app and scroll down to the bottom, click on write a review, and then you can leave us 5 stars and a comment letting us know what you love the most about the episodes and the show. Okay, so let's dive into this week's conversation. This week, I want to talk about something a little bit different. We're going to be talking about 3 tips to starting a profitable podcast. And why I want to talk about this is because I have some changes and transformations coming in the next few weeks. So when I think back as to why and when I started this podcast, it was always meant to help you feel less alone, to help you feel more inspired to live the life that you want to be living every single day. And regardless of how things continue to evolve for me, for my business, for what I do, and for how I help people, all of that always rings true. That mission and that vision will never change. But what will start to shift as my business continues to grow are some of the different topics that I talk about on here in these solo episodes. So moving forward, if you haven't really noticed already, I'm going to start rotating between guest interviews and solo episodes with me. And in the guest interviews, there's still going to be incredible conversations all about helping you really tap into your full potential, learn something new through a business lens, help you live your most purposeful and inspired life. Through the solo episodes, it's going to be the exact same thing. So the point of the solo episodes is to really be diving into different mindset chats and mindset blocks, limiting beliefs, things like that come up for us. But also, I'm going to be integrating a lot more conversation around podcasting, podcast chats, how to create a podcast, how to start a podcast, how to launch a podcast, how to be a good interviewer, tips and tricks that you need to know. The reason why this is coming to light now is that I've been a podcast editor and I've been a podcast producer for 2 years, and I help my clients launch and manage their podcasts. So I had this whole business that I was doing on the side, if you will. And it really felt like where I am now in my life, it really felt like it was only fair to share with you all of my insight on podcasting in a bite-sized form. So I know that some of you listening will not be into this conversation, and that is totally okay. But I know that there's a lot of you that will, and that will find it super valuable. And that is so amazing and so exciting. The goal of this podcast is to be a one-stop shop for all of the things that you need to live your life on purpose. So whether that's business, relationships, mindset, purpose, diving into something different, your dreams, your goals, can be any of those different things. One of those things for me is podcasting, because so many of you, especially as business owners, want to be on podcasts. And maybe you even have an interest in starting your own, right? So today I want to share with you my 3 tips for starting a profitable podcast. So the first one is knowing your idea. You firstly need to know your idea and what you're going to be talking about on your podcast. It's really great to want to start a podcast, to have a podcast, but it's a completely different thing, different conversation to really keep it going in the long term. In order to be able to keep your podcast alive for years and years and years, you really need to clearly define what topics that you cover and what your show is about. If you don't have this clearly outlined, it's going to be really hard for you to stay consistent. Your show will not be all things to all people. So really think about who it is exactly that you're targeting and what kind of information they want to learn or hear from you every single week. When you can clearly know your idea and clearly understand what your audience wants to hear from you, your message will become way more powerful and way more consistent. Which brings me to my second point, which is structure and consistency. So, the number one reason why I see podcasters get burnt out and get overwhelmed is because they lack that structure and consistency in their processes, but also in their routine, if you will. It's really good to put an episode out here and there. You feel accomplished and it feels great. But it's even better to be putting episodes out consistently on the same day, every single week or bi-weekly, because your audience starts to learn and to expect that a new podcast episode is coming from you every single week on that specific day at that specific time. People are creatures of habit, right? So the more that you can do to create that consistency and fill in the expectation that your audience and listeners are going to have, the better it is for you in the long run. If you want your show to grow and become profitable, you really need to be putting in the work on the back end to making it a really consistent experience for your listeners. So this point here brings me to structure. And what is the structure of your show like, right? What can people expect every single time they listen to you? Your listeners and your audience are creatures of habit. They want to hear your content in a consistent and structured way. They want to hear it consistently. They want to know that they can expect a new episode every Monday. And then the other part of structure is structure in your processes. Podcasting takes a lot of work, a lot of time, and a lot of dedication. I can tell you, when I first started my podcast, it took me 4 hours every single week to get it ready to bring live to you. That was 2 years ago, though. And a lot of processes have been streamlined and, figured out since then. But it doesn't mean that it doesn't take a lot of time and a lot of dedication. So by having those clear processes and that clear structure, you're going to allow yourself to be more consistent. And then your listenership will continue to grow. And then this point brings me to the strategy behind how to do that. So I want you to think about like your launch strategy. And then I want you to think about your weekly promotion strategy. You do all of this work to get your content ready. You get all of this work to get your show ready to go. You upload it, you schedule it in advance, but no one will ever know about it if you don't have a plan in place to promote it. The more consistent you are, the more you can outline a strategy for your content, the more your audience grows and the more your listenership increases. Strategy is so important in making sure that you're always consistent and never missing your deadlines. So really think about what strategies are you implementing into your business every single day? What strategies are you implementing into your podcasting every single day? Because the more organized you can be, the more your audience will tune in, the more they'll want to share your show, let you know what they loved about your show, and then the more you're going to grow. And then in turn, it becomes this really profitable medium because you get to create this huge audience of people who are super excited to be joining you every single week, to learn from you, to hear what you have to say, and to learn about these different topics. And so we can talk on profitability in a future episode because it's a lot of information on how to create a profitable podcast in terms of monetizing your podcast. But for all intents and purposes of today's episode, in 3 tips to starting a profitable podcast, these are the foundations to be able to creating a podcast that you can monetize and that you can have as part of your business structure to bring in that passive income that you may be wanting. So to recap, the first part is know your idea. The second is have structure and consistency. The third is create a strategy to promote your hard work. Okay, let me know what you loved from this episode. I know there was a lot of information, and I'm so looking forward to hearing your thoughts on this episode. Make sure to share it with someone that you know needs to hear this message. Be sure to tune into next week's episode. I'm so looking forward to seeing you back here, and I cannot wait to hear how much you like these tips, if they're helpful, if you want more, and how we can continue to keep this content coming for you. Have an amazing week ahead, and remember that happiness happens when you're least expecting it.